Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling some really big questions, the kind that have been around forever, really.
Hmm.
Like, can we truly know anything? And, what makes a belief actually solid, well-founded?
Yeah, it sounds abstract, but it hits right at the core of how we navigate the world, doesn't it? How we understand everything.
Exactly. It's about the foundations.
Right. And we've got a great mix of thinkers to help us explore this. We're talking Plato, Confucius, Descartes, Nietzsche, Mill.
Ayer, Taylor, Fanon, too.
Yeah.
It's a real sweep across history and thought.
It is a fantastic range of perspectives.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to unpack some of these core ideas. Things like certainty, what knowledge is, how perception fits in, what justification means.
And we want to do it in a way that's, clear and engaging, shed some light on these long-running debates without getting too bogged down in jargon.
Okay, so a question this huge. Where do we even start?
Well, a good place, I think, is with the most direct challenge, radical skepticism.
Ah, right, the deep down doubt.
Exactly. Not just, wondering if you left the stove on,
Yeah.
but the philosophical idea that maybe, just maybe, we can't be truly certain about anything. The worry is often rooted in our senses. Thinkers like Ayer really dug into this problem of perception, basically our main tools for understanding the world, sight, hearing, touch. They can mislead us, right?
Yeah, optical illusions, dreams. How do you prove you're not in the matrix, essentially?
That's the extreme version, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know definitively that what you perceive matches up with some objective reality out there? It's a tough one to refute.
Feels almost like a philosophical trap you can't argue your way out of.
It can feel that way,
Yeah.
and yet we humans seem wired to want to know things, to find truth.
Right, there's that drive.
You see it in Confucius, for instance. He talks about eagerness for knowledge, saying something like, I don't open up the truth to someone who isn't eager to get knowledge. It suggests this natural pull towards understanding, away from just floating uncertainty.
That makes me think of Descartes immediately. He was so worried about being deceived.
Yes. His whole project in the Meditations was born from that anxiety.
He decided to just doubt everything he possibly could.
Systematically. He wanted to see if anything survived that process. If there was one thing he absolutely couldn't doubt,
His foundation.
that was the goal. Find that bedrock. His famous, I think, therefore I am, that was his attempt to nail down that one certain point amidst all the doubt.
So we have this basic conflict. The possibility of total uncertainty versus this innate human push to know, and these big philosophical efforts to find solid ground.
That's the tension, yeah.
Okay, so moving from that, how do we usually define knowledge? The standard philosophical starting point is often justified true belief. What's packed into that phrase?
Well, on the surface, it seems simple enough. You believe something, it happens to be true, and you have good reasons for believing it.
Right. Justified. True. Belief.
But the real sticking point, the part that's caused endless debate, is justified. What actually counts as a good enough reason?
Ugh, yeah. That seems incredibly slippery. One person's solid reason is another person's, well, nonsense.
Exactly. And that leads directly into something called the regress problem.
Okay.
If every reason, every justification you give for a belief needs its own justification,
Oh.
where does it end? Do you just keep meeting reasons for your reasons forever? An infinite chain.
Like turtles all the way down?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And if it is an infinite chain, does that mean nothing is ever truly justified at the bottom? There's no ultimate foundation to stand on?
Wow, okay. That's dizzying. So even the idea of having a solid reason is problematic. Let's shift focus slightly to how we get information in the first place. Perception, our senses. How does that play into this knowledge puzzle?
Well, perception is absolutely central. I mean, it's our main interface with the world outside our heads, right? And a really major split here is between realism and idealism.
Or realism and idealism, what's the core difference?
So realism, broadly, is the view that there's a real world out there, existing independently of our minds. And our senses, flawed as they might be sometimes, can give us basically accurate information about it.
The common sense view, maybe? The chair is there, whether I see it or not?
Pretty much. Idealism, though, suggests that reality is, in some fundamental way, tied to our minds or our consciousness, maybe dependent on perception itself.
So the falling tree in the forest, if no one's there.
That doesn't make a sound. An idealist might say sound, as a perceived quality, requires a perceiver. A realist would say the physical vibrations happen regardless.
Interesting distinction. Now, you mentioned Ayer in the problem of perception earlier. How did he try to handle this?
Ayer really zeroed in on the difficulty of describing our raw sensory experiences, what philosophers sometimes call sense contents or sense data.
Like the pure redness I experience when I see a fire truck.
Exactly.
Huh.
How do you describe that in a way that directly links it to the physical object, the fire truck?
It's tricky. Ayer suggested we sort of define material things based on patterns in these sense contents.
Patterns.
Yeah, how different sensory experiences, the redness, the shape, the sound of the siren, maybe the feel of the metal if you touch it consistently bundled together. So our concept of fire truck isn't a direct grasp of the thing in itself, maybe, but more like a recognition of this recurring cluster of sensory experiences.
Okay, so it's less about a perfect mirror of reality, more about consistent experiences we label. That makes sense.
It's a way to try and bridge that gap between our subjective experience and the external world.
But then illusions, the
Mhm.
bent stick in water, mirages. If our senses can fool us so easily, how much trust can we really place in them? Doesn't that undermine the whole thing?
Illusions are definitely a major challenge. They force us to admit perception isn't foolproof, that it's not always giving us the straight story.
Yeah.
And this is where something like perspectivism becomes relevant. Perspectivism, meaning our point of view matters.
In a nutshell, yes. It's the idea that our understanding is always shaped, always filtered by our particular perspective, our background, our beliefs, our physical location, you name it.
So there isn't just one God's eye view of things.
Perspectivism tends to suggest not. It emphasizes that different viewpoints can lead to different, sometimes even conflicting interpretations or understandings of the same thing. Think of witness testimonies after an event, slight variations based on where people were standing, what they focused on.
Right. So perception isn't just passive receiving, it's active, shaped by us. Okay, let's loop back to justification. We mentioned the regress problem, but there's another big debate. Internalism versus externalism. What's that about?
Okay, so this is about what makes a belief justified. Internalism generally says that justifying factors have to be internal to the believer's mind.
Meaning, things I'm aware of, reasons I can access in my head.
Exactly. You need to be able to consciously access and maybe articulate your reasons for the belief to count as justified on most internalist views.
Okay. And externalism.
Externalism says, well, factors outside your conscious awareness can play a role. For instance, maybe your belief was formed by a reliable cognitive process, like good eyesight under normal conditions.
Ah. So even if I can't explain the optics of vision.
Right. If the process that produced the belief is reliable, the belief might be justified, even if you don't have conscious access to why it's reliable.
So internalism is about having the reasons available to you. Externalism is more about how you reliably got the belief. Big difference.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to different ideas about what makes a belief trustworthy.
And connected to the structure of justification, we have foundationalism versus coherentism, two different models.
Two major competing pictures, yeah. Foundationalism is the idea that our knowledge structure is like a building.
Okay.
It rests on a solid foundation of basic beliefs. These might be self-evident truths or maybe beliefs based directly on an immediate experience, things that don't need further justification. They just are justified.
Like Descartes searching for his bedrock.
Exactly like that. Those foundational beliefs then support all the other beliefs built on top of them.
And coherentism, that sounds different.
Very different. Coherentism pictures our beliefs more like a web or maybe a raft.
A web.
A belief is justified not because it rests on some ultimate foundation, but because it fits together, it coheres with all your other beliefs. The justification comes from the mutual support within the whole system.
So it's about consistency and interconnectedness, not a base layer.
That's the core idea. Each belief lends support to others and is supported by them. It's the overall coherence of the web that matters.
Interesting. Like a jigsaw puzzle where every piece helps confirm the placement of the others.
That's a great analogy. And, both foundationalism and coherentism have their own strengths and weaknesses, their own problems. Neither one has totally won the day in philosophy.
Which I guess brings us back full circle to those core questions we started with. After all this, first up, can we ever really know anything with absolute certainty? What's the feeling now?
Well, considering the power of skepticism, the tricks perception can play, the puzzles around justification, achieving that kind of absolute ironclad certainty seems really difficult, maybe impossible for most things we believe.
So the radical skeptic might still have a point.
They highlight a genuine philosophical challenge for sure. But And this is important, that doesn't mean all beliefs are equally flimsy. We can still aim for beliefs that are really well justified, highly probable, incredibly reliable for all practical purposes.
Even if they lack that final stamp of absolute certainty, maybe the goal shifts a bit.
Perhaps. Maybe it's less about eliminating all possible doubt and more about proportioning our belief to the evidence and reasons we have. Being cautious, as Confucius might advise.
Okay, that leads to the second question. What makes a belief genuinely justified then? If certainty is out, what does good justification look like?
And again, as we saw, there isn't one simple answer philosophers agree on. It's about reasons you can access internally, or reliable external processes. Does it need a foundation, or is coherence enough?
So it depends on which framework you find more convincing.
Largely, yes. What seems clear is that genuine justification involves having strong support for your belief, according to some defensible standard. It's about being able to give reasons, provide evidence, and show why your belief is more likely to be true than not within a particular framework.
Got it. And the last core question. Does perception support or sabotage our claims to know an external reality? It felt like it did a bit of both.
It really does cut both ways. On the one hand, perception is undeniably our primary connection to the world. It's how we gather almost all the raw data. Ayer's focus on sense experience highlights its foundational role for empirical knowledge.
Okay.
But, as we discussed, illusions show it's fallible. The realism-idealism debate shows its status is philosophically contested. Perspectivism suggests it's always filtered, so it doesn't give us this perfect, unvarnished window onto reality.
So it supports our claims, but in a qualified, cautious way. It doesn't necessarily sabotage them entirely, but it doesn't give us certainty either.
That seems like a reasonable summary. It's essential, but imperfect. Our best link, perhaps, but a link we need to be critical and aware of.
Wow. So yeah, the whole quest for knowledge is complex. It's messy, fascinating, filled with these deep questions that people have wrestled with for ages.
Absolutely. And maybe absolute certainty isn't the only prize. Understanding the landscape, the challenges, the different ways to think about justification, that itself is incredibly valuable.
It gives you a more nuanced way to think about your own beliefs and the claims others make, a more critical lens.
Exactly. It pushes us towards being more thoughtful about why we believe what we believe.
Right. So on that note, maybe here's something for you, the listener, to chew on. Pick a belief you hold pretty strongly. Ask yourself, what really justifies this belief for me? What reasons do I have? And, importantly, what kind of evidence or argument might actually make me doubt it or change my mind?
That's a great exercise, bringing these big ideas down to a personal level.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into knowledge and certainty. Hopefully it sparked some thoughts, and we definitely encourage you to keep exploring these fundamental questions.